Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. Today we have my friend, Christine Mathieu. She is a wealth coach, and we're going to be talking about money mindset, which has been a really popular topic on not only this podcast, but we're talking about business owners, right? So why are people in business? Besides, they love what they do. It's for the money, right? And so many people have all of these blocks around money. So first and foremost, Christine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So we've known each other a long time, and you have been helping people with their wealth consciousness for a long time. So let's start there. Let's talk about how you are helping people to identify what some of those mindset issues are that hold them back from creating real wealth in their lives.
That was a mouthful, Alicia.
That's a big question. I know.
It's like a huge question. I'm like, where do I even start? Oh my gosh. Okay. So, where do we want to start with that then? Go back for me. If you can go, what's the first part of that question? Because I know it was a lot. I want to make sure I touch on it.
Let's start with, what have you been seeing with the clients that you've been working with for all of these years? So what are some of those common patterns where people are getting in their own way?
Okay. So that's a good starting place. So the patterns or even the themes that I've been seeing over the years, and it's interesting, right? Because I've been coaching now for over 10 years. And prior to that, I was a traditional financial advisor for 20. So I've been in this industry or in the financial realm for a long time. And it never ceases to amaze me in terms of the themes and the patterns that just continue to repeat. Right. And they don't ever seem to go away or go anywhere. And, show up in different ways. You think you've got one thing healed and then it shows up again. But I think it is a testament to doing the work around paying attention, right? Paying attention to your mindset, paying attention to the approach that you use prior to making a decision and prior to taking, action. So some of the themes or patterns that I've seen, they don't always reveal themselves as money issues, but then when we dig a little bit deeper, the money piece, shows up. So I have worked with, a number of people that I would say are either on the cusp of, or in the midst of, or just on the other side of a major life transition. Right. So that could be someone that just went through a divorce, widowhood. Widowhood seems to be a big one. It would also include your pre-retirees or retirees. And because we're talking about business owners, right? When they get to that place where it's time to think about the sale of their business, and then moving through the sale of the business itself, and then coming out on the other side of the business, right? So what I have noticed, and actually I'm going to give you like a little, some almost like storylines, right? So you can kind of relate to what these people look like, and then we can, boil it down to what the themes have been. So relative to, the widows, what I have seen is, you have a widow who has identified herself as such, right? So she's actually been living from that place for an extended period of time. And then one morning decides, you know what, I am totally sick of this label, and I'm now ready to be someone different. And I have no idea, what that looks like. And what else? Finding, purpose. Where do I fit in? to this life in this world. Another widow had the realization after she lost her husband. She said, oh my God, the happy parent just died. Right now, what do I do? How do I step in and be that happy parent as I continue raising our son? Right. And it's also oh my God, now I'm in charge of all the stuff, right? Every facet that makes up my world, right? And now that includes the financial piece, right? And what does that mean to me? How does it feel as I'm trying to navigate this particular, facet? The business owner that's trying to, that's about to sell, his or her, business. Identity crisis, right? So they came to know themselves. They learned, not so much learned, but came to thrive in their life because of, right, the business. The business is what gave them a sense of relevance, right? So now that they're looking to sell it, the big question is, who am I now? Right? Well, what am I going to do from day to day? Right. And so they're not just concerned about the sale of and the passing on of their wealth, right, in terms of money, but they're also concerned with the passing on of their wealth in terms of their values, right, and what they're passing on, to the next generation. So all of that is tied in. If we were to boil down all of these individuals, all these stories, the running themes I have noticed have been, number one, identity, right? Who am I? Who am I in the context or within who am I in the context of my relationship with my work, with my business? Who am I in the context of my relationship with money, right? And how does that run parallel to all of the other relationships, that I have in my life? Right. So identity, what's another one? Knowing, like being really clear on what matters most to you, in other words, your values. So being clear on what your values are and then honoring those values. Right. So not compromising, in any way. On those around those values, like, because the third piece is legacy. And I always say, in order to leave a legacy, you need to be living that legacy, right? Because the legacy that you live, right, the life that you live is ultimately the legacy that you leave. And most people, they want to be that example. And the best way to be that example is to know what your values are and to live by them.
So what you're talking about here is a lot of deep inner awareness.
Yes.
I love that you're talking about identity and how that is entangled with our money and with our wealth, as well as with our business. And I've seen it with my clients as well. And in some cases, we're not necessarily working specifically on their money mindset. Maybe we're just focusing in on their ability to communicate more effectively, to have more boundaries. It might be, they're setting an intention to expand their business, and they might have to let go of certain things that they've held on to in the past to get to that next level. And how we perceive ourselves, that self-identity, sometimes there's a conflict. There's a conflict between who we've been being and who we are aspiring to become. Now, when we're talking more specifically about money, it's interesting because a lot of people's self-image, their identity with relation to money, is not congruent with what they want. A lot of people are still holding on to these old ideas of money's a struggle. I came from nothing. I have to be very, very protective of my money. I have to, very guarded. And it's not that you should just be reckless, but if you stop for a moment and you really look at what do you believe about yourself and your ability to be wealthy, there oftentimes is a lot of cleanup work that needs to be done and to start to create that new association in your mind, that new identity that supports the wealth that you are creating for your future.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what happens too is when it comes to money and wealth, I believe we've come to confuse the two terms, right? We equate money with wealth, and that's not necessarily the truth, right? And what I mean by that is, for example, I know I've shared this with you before, because we have talked about this so many times over the course of many years. But the word wealth, right? Because if you were to look up the definition of the word wealth, it would read something like the accumulation of an abundance of money and or material possessions, right? And that's been the operating definition for centuries, right? And certainly for a long enough period of time for us as a society, as a culture, and as individuals to develop our own sense of self, right? In terms of that definition. But if we were to look at the original definition of wealth, which dates back to, I believe it's like either the 11th or 12th century, it's simply a combination of its root and suffix. The meaning is the combination of its root and suffix. So the true meaning of wealth is W-E-A-L, which is the root, which means wellness or well-being, right? And then the suffix th means the state of or the condition of, right? So really, when we're talking about wealth, we're talking about one's condition of well-being as the individual would define it, or better stated, I think, as the individual would decide it to be so, right? Because how I would define well-being might be different than how you would envision it, right? I like to say, well-being is happiness or a sense of peace, or one of my new favorite words is content, right? I love the word, content. So then if we were to look at our state of well-being through the lens of our relationship with money, now what is that relationship trying to teach us about our own sense of well-being, right? Is it lacking, right? Is it enough? Do we want more, right? What is it within the context of our relationship with money? What is it that we are choosing to value?
That's powerful, because a lot of people have seen individuals who have a lot of money but really are not wealthy. And there certainly is a difference between having an accumulation of money, which is, slowly dwindling away and not necessarily creating more wealth, versus someone who maybe has less cash flow, but they may have an abundance of wealth producing assets, and their quality of life could be far better than someone who has 20 times as much liquid cash. And then we've also seen those individuals who appear to be very successful financially, but their marriage is a mess. Their attitude is absolutely awful. So the quality of their relationships in general is suffering. There are people who have a lot of success in business and with money and are grossly overweight and unhealthy and having significant health complications. So we can have beliefs that support the accumulation of money. We can have beliefs that support having a healthy body. We can have beliefs that support having a healthy relationship, and other areas of our life can be incomplete, just a complete mess, really. So when we're talking about that inner state of wealth and really defining what is wealth for me as an individual, what is success for me as an individual, it is just that. It's a very individual thing. But the one thing that I think is kind of universal is that in all of those instances, whether it is your money, the success in your business, the quality of your relationships, the state of your health, it should feel good to you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what I love, about emotions, right? I think emotions are often misunderstood, especially in the world of money and finances. I always laugh. Oh, I wish I could remember what the exact words are, but I laugh when I read something like, you need to take the emotions out of investing, or you need to take emotions out of financial, planning or financial strategy. And I just sit back and I go, well, how are you going to do that? You're going against your very being. You're going against how you're constructed, right? And you're actually going against a gift, right? A tool that exists within you that can teach you to actually be a better investor, a better planner, a tool that can help you reach that state of well-being that you so desire and sustain that state of well-being, right? Nobody's interested in temporary positive change. We want it to be sustainable, right? So use the tools that we're given, which when you said, it should feel good. And when it feels good and it feels right, then you're in alignment with a good decision or what I call a right-minded thought, right? Or a right-minded, belief. So don't try to stuff your emotions. Pay attention, to them, right? Because if you're feeling off, if you're feeling some type of upset, if you're feeling a disconnect or resistance, lack, right? If your awareness is a little bit more developed and you can actually recognize when you're coming from a place of lack or scarcity, when you notice that you are experiencing something emotionally negative, well, that's kind of the red flag, right? That should say to you, stop what you're doing, right? Check in with yourself. Don't take any further action until you've checked in with yourself and identified what the true upset is, right? So you need to pay attention. What was the other thing I was going to share with you too? Is also owning, right? Owning the choice of how you feel. Right. There's a tremendous amount of power in that, because when you finally embrace the fact that you've chosen to feel about something in a certain way, that also means that you have the power to change your mind about it.
You brought up a couple of things, and I want to go into that just a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Because there is that distinction, which you're alluding to, between feeling a fear, which sometimes will surface as a feeling of resistance, versus your own inner guidance. And I always say that our fear really does cloud our inner guidance. Fear, we can clean that up. There are strategies, there are tools, there are techniques that can help you to release and shift out of fear. Your inner guidance is really that peace, right? So we hear so many really, really successful individuals talk about their gut instinct. And that's really what we're talking about here is you have this incredible tool within you, your inner guidance. Now, sometimes people make a mistake of thinking that fear is their inner guidance, but if you take the time and you actually really look at it, you can find that distinction within yourself. So I like to use different analogies. So like, if you're walking down the street and you have that instinct, that inner guidance that says, don't go down that way. Something's off about that, right? You can hear it and then you can decide, I'm not going to do that, right? But now, if you have unresolved fears in your subconscious mind that anytime I walk down the street, something bad is going to happen. Somebody's going to jump out and get me. Well, now you can't hear your inner guidance because you're already in this triggered state the whole time you're walking down the street. So you've got to clean that up. That's what I always refer to as doing the inner work. And sometimes we don't even realize that we have these inner blocks to our guidance because we're just kind of going through the motions. But then when we do something like maybe you are going to make a new investment and that triggers that fear, well, now you have an opportunity to say, oh, I've got this wacky stuff in my subconscious mind that is not supporting the wealth that I am choosing to create for myself. I've got to do some inner work. I've got to clean this up so that I can feel my inner guidance. And that is going to help me to make the decisions that are right and good for me.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit now about you and some of your own mindset stuff that you've had to overcome. It's always interesting whenever we do this type of work with our clients, right? We are our own greatest teachers in so many cases. So is there anything that you can share with us about your own mindset journey, getting from, where you've been to where you are today?
Oh my goodness.
I know that's
Geez.
big. So just maybe pick one.
Yeah, see, because I've had a lot of stuff. Okay, so, and I talk about this, quite a bit, and it's always interesting to share this too, especially because, now I'm a wealth coach and I'm positioned inside of a financial firm, which is fantastic. And it took me a while to get here, but it says a lot, to the openness, to what it is, that I do. But and I think I arrived here because of the inner work, right, that I have been doing for all of these years. And I attribute my inner work to the practice of true forgiveness as it's taught in through A Course in Miracles. Now, the transition that I'm going to mention, I was not practicing true forgiveness at the time that I went through it. However, the lessons and so forth have, come back and repeated themselves in certain ways. But back in, oh my goodness, 2007, it was 2007, and I was still a financial advisor, and I had to file for bankruptcy. So it came on the heels of my third divorce. Yes, third divorce. Let's see. And I was a single parent, right? So I had oh my gosh, how old was my youngest at the time? I can't remember. Maybe he was around 18 months old. And then my oldest was 4 years old. But it was a pretty tumultuous time because I had work, life, another work life transition, going on at simultaneously, right? So really, I guess you could say it was 3 transitions going on at the same time. But the one that really stands out for me is, the bankruptcy, right? Because here I was a financial advisor and I'm filing for bankruptcy. Who does that? Right? I mean, you can imagine the thoughts that went on through my mind, at the time. I mean, yeah, sure. I had to do what I had to do, right? I had 2 small children, to take care of and so forth. But still, there was that voice that kept saying, seriously, you should be better than this, right? What did you do wrong to get you here? Right? Or you deserve this, right? You deserve to be filing for bankruptcy because you are bankrupt, right? And I think that was probably one of my bigger ahas, was that the bankruptcy showed up financially, right? It showed up within the context of money, but really what it was teaching me was that I had rendered my being, myself, as bankrupt, right? And I had been choosing to listen to the negative self-talk, right? And gave the negative self-talk far greater credibility to my sense of self than otherwise, right? So believing that I wasn't good enough, right? I ended up in an abusive marriage and then ended up divorced because I deserved that, right? At the heart of that is unworthiness, right? And lack of, self-love, right? And it just so happened that it played itself out in terms of a divorce and a bankruptcy, right? Once I'm trying to remember, yeah, it's once I picked up the book, The Disappearance of the Universe, which is written by Gary Renard, which speaks directly to, the teachings and the practice of A Course in Miracles, because I always knew, I said, there's got to be a recipe, right? There has to be some way in which I can apply, oh gosh, I'm losing my words, but I knew that there had to be something that I could do, right? That I could practice, right? That there had to be some type of daily practice that I could implement that would help me to shift from the negative self-talk into self-love, right? And that for me was the practice of true forgiveness. It gave me that process, that daily practice, right? And it helped me to just get better at being more self-aware, right? To the point where I now pay attention so closely. I notice nearly every single upset, right? And it doesn't matter within the context of what relationship, right? It doesn't matter if it's showing up in my work. Doesn't matter if it's showing up in my relationship with money. Doesn't matter if it's showing up in my relationship with my sons, right? Whenever I notice an upset, I notice it. I look at it without judgment, right? So that's key, right? Your negative self-talk, you have to look at it without judgment, take ownership of it, and then you can change your mind.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So those periods of upsets are few and far between. I mean, it's not that they don't happen. They do happen, but they just don't linger as long as they used to. So I experience greater periods of peace, right? So my sense of peace, my sense of content and happiness, and even work fulfillment and productivity, all of that has become not just achievable, but achieved and sustainable.
I always tell my clients, it does get easier, right? So as you're doing this inner work, at first, it's just like anything. It's just like learning how to tie your shoe. It's a little tricky. It's a little cumbersome. It's a little awkward. You're not very good at it at first. But as you develop that skill, as your subconscious mind learns all of the little muscular nuances to tying your shoe, you develop a degree of mastery. And as you do, it doesn't mean that on occasion you won't have a lace that's maybe a little shorter than you would like and makes that particular shoe a little more difficult to tie than some of your others, but you're still able to do it fairly easily. And certainly the inner work is exactly the same. Once you develop the awareness at the deeper levels of your mind, that's how habits are formed.
Yes.
It's just another habit that you're developing, but this one is a very empowering habit that helps you to continue up-leveling your mindset, up-leveling your consciousness, being a more happy, empowered person. And it gets easier. It just gets easier and easier.
It does. It does. And two things, that I'll share is how did I just lose that? You were just saying it gets easier and easier. One of the shifts that I, had recognized, and this is where I think a lot of business owners, including executives and leaders, where the mistake in belief comes, where I notice the mistakes in belief is that the operating belief right now is that success brings happiness, right? However you would define success to be, right? It could be a result of, a certain level of productivity. It could be stuff, like you had mentioned before, just high earning, capacity, whatever success is. People believe that until they won't experience happiness until they've had success, right? But the truth is, and the reality is that it's happiness that brings success, right? And that's, to me, that's the true shift. That's the shift, the 360.
Yeah. And it starts inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Christine, how can our listeners get in contact with you?
Two ways, probably the easiest two ways. Just go to the website, www.noteadvisors.com. Hopefully I spelled that correctly, but noteadvisors.com. Or you can email me at Christine, and that's CH with a CH, Christine at noteadvisor.com.
Awesome. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I think there were quite a few takeaways.
Good.
We probably could have gone deep down a couple of different rabbit holes.
I'm sure.
But I do want to thank you so much for sharing your personal story and your inspiration and all those little nuggets that you shared with us. Thank you so much, Christine.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And of course, I have to thank all of our listeners. If you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.